Welcome back to Man Across New Horizons. I'm dear darling, as shall we see what's going on on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where we're gonna, meander around, stumble around until we find a conversation topic to talk about, because, that's just how we do. We go meandering. It's a weird sense of time travel, where the fact that you know what I'm going to talk about before I know what I'm going to talk about. We're in this sort of state of uncertainty, this, what's the word? Purgatory of conversational unknown, which is unresolved. The future is uncertain, but I don't know what has been, but you do, and I don't know. It's a very interesting dynamic, isn't it? Time travel. I don't know where I'm going with this. Hello everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow at 6:08 p.m. on Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. I think you can predict the future. Who's that guy who's like really famous for predicting, like Nostradamus style? Look, I like to think of myself as someone whose basis foundations operate on logic and reason, but I am fueled by emotions, and the emotional and the non-logical, or the illogical. Illogical kind of gives the implication that it goes against logic, while so much it's more like non-logical, like not subscribing to logic. And you might be like, hey, did you just say you are a human being, basically? And while it's certainly true, I think most people probably function on a combination of both emotions and logic, heart and brain, if we're going to use it that way, because I think it was definitely not representative of the actual forms. They're analogous. Oh, look, playing a little bit of playing a bit of Legend of Zelda Breet. I forgot what I was going to say about this. I do feel like, people tend to have sways in one direction more than another, tend to be a lot more logical, a lot more non-logical, or a lot... non-logical is not really the right word, but I don't want to say creative either, because that means that, logical is not creative. Here I am, sort of, driving a partisan wedge between them, which is exactly the thing I always talk about, the fact I dislike doing, It's sort of like arts as scientists, like, oh, are you an artist or are you a scientist? And then, me being someone who's always kind of been both, it's sort of just like, huh? How does that work? Basically, what I'm trying to say is these are not mutually exclusive. I'm just trying to talk about anecdotally my own experiences with life. But I tend to think of myself as someone who has a logical foundation, but is swayed by, but it's driven by emotional characteristics, I suppose, in its own sense. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's sort of like a lot of my views, I think, are grounded in reality, but a lot of the ways I express my views or interface, I suppose, with my views and the world tends to be not very grounded in reality, much more whimsical, idealistic in that sort of sense. But if you drill down further, you see it's got a solid foundation of logic behind it all. Now, where am I going with this? But the sense of predicting the future, the core logic part of me is there is nothing more that you can do to there's no okay, hold on. I'm trying to think how to phrase this, because I was going to be there's no 100% way you could predict the future. Okay, that's not true, I suppose. You could say... okay, it's going back and forth. I'm basically having this debate right now in my mind, and I'm trying to verbalize it right now, but I'm like a stenographer in a courtroom, except for I can't type fast enough. But basically, okay, you can't predict the future is what I was going to state that. And then I said, well, you could predict the future. You could say time is going to pass in the next second, and then it almost certainly will. And then it's, sort of going back and being well, technically you don't know that because it hasn't happened yet. You could say that time hasn't passed. Or time could just theoretically just stop in the next second and it could never resume again. That gives an interesting sort of dynamic where now the non-logical side sounds a lot more whimsical, I suppose, as an argument than the logical side, which is a bit strange. But it brings me back to we were learning about probability in primary school. I think this was year 3, so this would probably put me around year 7-year-old to 8-year-old, where we were learning about probability, how but we had categories which we had to come up with things in real life which would happen. And then I remember one of them was 0%, one of them was 10, or one was 0%, so impossible, 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. So then we were going to be, so then, all of them were pretty reasonable. 50% would be flip a coin, and then 75% would be I'm going to school tomorrow. 25% would be, well, I guess 75% is a bit low for that, and 25% will be like, I'm gonna break a bone tomorrow. It's not meant to be the exact percentages, but it's meant to be like, likely to happen, not likely to happen, and 50-50. And then but then the interesting things always happen at these boundaries. I say interesting, in a mathematical, not in a mathematical sense, but like in, it's interesting to say interesting, I suppose, because a lot of the time that's where exceptions happen, especially if it's coming from my very mathematical standpoint. That's a lot where the trivial examples tend to occur. But at 0%, it was like, okay, we could conceivably come up with things. I remember we started out saying things like, oh, a helicopter's going to land in the school field tomorrow. And then, I can't remember who my teacher was, which is why I think it was a year 3 teacher, but I'm not actually sure. It was like, well, technically, a helicopter could land in the school tomorrow. It's just a very, very low chance. That would be like a 1% chance, or 1%, obviously not. Don't read into numbers too much. It's sort of like illustrative purposes. It's not impossible. So then it was like we had to drill down until we figured out something that was impossible. And obviously the easy way to do that, if you want a cheat and you are 7 and have this as your homework or something, just do 2 things which are mutually exclusive. I just say the probability of something happening, of 2 events which cannot occur simultaneously. I will blink and not blink or something the next time I blink. Doesn't even, or I will not blink the next time I blink. I guess that doesn't really even make sense. It inherently is a paradox, which kind of means it has to impossibly, it's not even inherently a paradox, it just can't happen, so it has to be impossible. Or you flip a coin and you get both heads and tails. Which I guess then you can argue maybe there's a minute chance that the coin splits in 2 and both head and tails lands up, but then by that point I think it kind of defeats the point of flipping the heads or tails. Well, it kind of defeats the point of flipping a coin in the first place. But the 100% one I remember was very interesting, because I remember we started out saying stuff like I'm, I can't remember, but I think it was something like, I'm going to, I don't know, I'll eat breakfast tomorrow, and then the teacher's like, oh, that's not technically possible, not technically guaranteed. And I was like, okay, then I'm going to blink, I'm going to blink tomorrow, and she's like, oh, technically not guaranteed. And it's basically, we just kept drilling down further and further and further until we just got to insanity, which is kind of sort of defeating a point, I think, of the exercise in the first place. Oh, I don't actually know you can get Zodiac crafting recipes from the island, this island. I thought it was only space theme things. But yeah, I mean, I know Zodiac items are space theme, but I thought the Zodiac ones were exclusively you could only get from Celeste. But yeah, what was I saying? So I can't remember what we settled on being something that was 100% going to happen. But, it sort of just sticks in my mind, because I remember at the time being like, well, technically, that's not even guaranteed to happen, whatever we settled on, because I was like, if we're going to go down into the minutiae details of it, of this isn't technically guaranteed to happen because of X, Y, Z, A, B, C, or whatever, there's a lot of things which you can continuously argue for could theoretically not happen, to the point where it becomes counterproductive, I think, to the lesson, because it's meant to be, as I said, for illustrative purposes, to introduction to probability. I think a child is very readily will accept, hey, I'm going to blink in the next 10 seconds or something as 100% possibility, even if it's not technically. But anyway, so the long and short of it is, can you predict the future? Technically, no, but you can kind of, yes, by making claims about it and then doing them, but also technically, no, that might not technically happen. But really, if anything, maybe we should take a Bayesian approach. Wait, is it I can't remember, Bayesian or frequentist? Well, one of them is basically, I mean, I'm going to have to think about what these actually are in the first place again, from a mathematical standpoint, but we should take the viewpoint of if the results happen, then it doesn't really matter, I suppose, in the end. But yeah, I don't really know where I was going with this. I mean, this was what I was saying, predicting the future, which, no, I guess we're kind of we've shifted topics on that now. We're not talking about predicting the future. We're very much talking about 100% guarantees and impossibilities. Because, there's a mathematical definition of impossibility, things which 0% chance of happening, what's the probability of you getting a 2 in a 0 to 1 uniform distribution. It's impossible because it's literally just not in the range of a function, of a probability function in the first place, so it's 0. But of course, there's also sort of like a functional impossibility as well. It's sort of the same way when people say things like literally in real life, and they don't literally mean literally, but they mean like close enough, or like figuratively, or whatever. Well, okay, I guess there's a strong difference between figuratively and close enough, but like literally that's like my favorite thing or something. Okay, maybe it's not actually your favorite thing, but what you kind of mean is like it's basically one of your favorite things, or something like that. It's like a functional impossibility. When you say something's impossible, you just really mean it's sort of like, okay, if you're going to break it down in a mathematical sense, you mean it has the tiniest chance ever of happening, but potentially could be possible by some like divine ordinance or divine intervention, I suppose. But it's sort of like, again, it's sort of like flaunting one of the axioms of like conversation. It's kind of disregarding the point of conversation, which is to communicate. If you're kind of going now, well, actually, that's not actually impossible, which is, I would say not privy to good conversation, but I suppose that's up to you, depending on how much you like a good debate or not. So yeah, I don't know. Possibilities and guarantees. I don't really know where I was going with this conversation. Maybe I should go back to the predicting the future sort of thing. I feel like this is good to sort of like segue though. It was good like spin out conversation. Impossibilities. I wonder what are impossibilities in my lifetime. Functional impossibilities, not actual literal impossibilities. Because, I suppose to loop background to sort of around predicting the future, but not really talking about it. You know, like how in when was the first car made? 20s? I don't even know. First car made, no, it must be way earlier. It must be like 1800s or something, right? 1886. There we go. I guess it's not way earlier, but you know what I mean. Like when they were trying to predict the future in 1880, they were like, oh, by the year 2000, we'll have flying cars or something like that, or like flying bicycles if you go back far enough, or that sort of thing. But basically, the general concept of us predicting the future is not very good, because the future that we're trying to predict is based off iterations of what we know in the present right now. Hence, like, while we do have flying mode of transports now, although Wright brothers invented the plane in 1940. No, that doesn't make sense. It was definitely before the World Wars. Well, wait, hold on. Wright brothers' first flight, 1900s. That's crazy to think about, by the way, how quickly things happen. We had 1880, first vehicle, car. I don't know when first train was. I'm going to guess then 1890. 1800, wow, the first... Oh yeah, hold on, that makes sense. The first train was definitely before first car. But anyway, first car, 1818. The first plane by Wright brothers was 1900. And then, like, 1966, we're literally on the moon. That's so crazy to think about how quickly that is. That's like one lifetime. Imagine, like, your most advanced mode of transport being, a bicycle that you use on a daily basis, I suppose. And then sometimes you get to see a steam train as a novel attraction to the fact that, and then, at some point in your life, you're walking on the moon. I suppose if you're, hold on, Buzz Aldrin or Neil Armstrong, or the other one who everyone forgets. Third person on moon team. No, not third person to walk on moon. Let's see. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. That's it. I don't know where I was going with this. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so basically predicting a future is kind of inherently based off the information we know now. It's like, it's not implausible, I think, to imagine yourself in 1880, we just got cars. Hey, what if we took the transport to, like, through other mediums as well, instead of on the ground? Why doesn't it go through the air? But the way we imagine it is obviously, we can only base it off what we know now. It's like, well, the only thing I can imagine right now is if a car was flying, or if a bicycle was flying. How would it fly? I don't know, with wings. That's how birds fly. I mean, certainly it's not too far. Well, I mean, not too far off in some grand extraction sense, but airplanes do have wings. They are motorized forms of transport, right? But of course, they don't inherently work really that similarly to how the predictions thought they were going to work, right? So, and then I suppose with the knowledge we know now, flying cars is I wouldn't say impossible, but just like not worth the effort, or certainly impossible in the way that they imagined it. It's not like we can have a bicycle with like big flappy bird wings, because the aerodynamics just don't work like that. You're going to have to need massive wings to be able to lift up the weight of a person, let alone a person plus a bicycle and the entire contraption itself, to a point it's no longer functional. Like, so didn't someone do a calculation that if you were human beings had wings, the wings would have to be like 10 feet long each or something to actually be able to fly over them? I don't remember the exact statistics. You can look it up. Because we're not, really made for flying, I suppose. I suppose if we had bones as light as bird bones did, and, were the size of birds, we could fly. I guess because we'd be birds, but still. It's just, I don't really know where I was going with this. Actually, that's interesting to think about. What if the entirety of the world, everything in the universe, was shrunk down proportionally 10 times or something, like an order of magnitude, such that the average human was now, in reality, the same size as the average bird? Could we fly then easier because, the volume to mass ratio is different? Like, we could... I'm trying to think, how do I don't know. That's a question for another time. I don't even know how to phrase that question. But yeah, I wonder what sort of impossibilities are in my lifetime. Impossible futures, shall I say. Well, I guess the easy thing to talk about right now is certainly the advent of AI is basically one of the biggest technological breakthroughs we have right now. Like, I mean, we're very much like in the sort of information era, the technological era, at least for me personally. I was born in 1997, so 4 years later, the advent of the internet, which I don't sort of remember. Obviously I was too young. Sorry, not the internet, but the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee. And how fast technology progressed. Like, I'm old enough to remember, brick phones basically being the go-to phone for everyone, and then that slow transition into, people getting more and more, mobile phones becoming more and more accessible, to now the fact we have a smartphone as a everyday, like everyone has a smartphone. I remember watching something on the news basically being like, are too many children getting mobile phones or something? And it was just like a load of, like interviews of that sort of thing, with like 12-year-olds having like a Nokia brick phone, which obviously you look back in retrospect and be like, yeah, I kind of want my child to have a phone so they can contact me in emergencies. But of course, it was in news as sensationalizing it, being like, oh, kids spend all their time, talking and texting and, speaking with their friends. God forbid. Sorry, I just keep accidentally like denting the plastic drawer beneath my desk. Not denting, but like bending. So it's interesting to see, like, I'm trying to extract, that relationship from like mobile phones, of like the brick phone, the landline phone, to smartphones we have nowadays. How can I apply that to technology we have now? And the biggest, I think, advent of technology, which is happening right now, like how in my childhood, I suppose, was the advent of the internet. And I suppose in my teen years to young adult is very much a portability or accessibility of a lot of these smart technology. And now it seems like we're on the cusp of AI technology becoming more of a thing. What do I think about that? I don't really know, to be perfectly honest. I certainly, I think I've spoken about AI before. It's both something technologically wise, I'm like, this is really cool. But of course, it's not something that you can take through the context of technology alone. There's a lot of context and like ramifications that come surrounding it, as me being an artist as well. I don't like the fact that it's being used, but basically artists don't get any credit for their work for being used into like these training models, I suppose, for AI. Things like that, how people can just be invalidated throughout no fault of their own just by creating something, and then people illegally, I suppose, unfairly taking rights to it. And how the legal minutiae of that, I suppose it's ironic we talked about the law recently, gets very sort of confused and muddled, and way out of the scope of things I am qualified to talk about. I mean, I'm not really qualified to talk about anything I'm talking about right now, but hey ho, here I am anyway. What I was going to say. So it's not unreasonable, I think, for AI to be like the big future technology thing. I think people what the impossible future is for our generation right now is people are being like, AI is going to be introduced to everything. We're going to be like, AI, the same way we have like smart fridges and smart watches and that sort of thing. Yeah, okay, they happen, but and I wouldn't say they're like a staple or defining thing. But AI is probably going to be, I can see AI helpers becoming much more prevalent, and AI I'm not sure revolutionizing, but upturning is probably a better word. A lot of job industries by certain low-level jobs, not low-level jobs, but autonomous jobs being automated, I suppose, by AI and things like that. But I wonder what that, like, the actual future is going to be like, the thing which people don't see coming, But these are like impossible future things. Again, I'm building off the information I already have, like the experience we have with AI right now, with technology, with how things are progressing and the things it's affecting. But I'm not psychic enough to be able to reach like 60 years into the future and be like, what are these like ramifications from things I don't even comprehend at the moment. It would be cool if I was. It would be cool if I was psychic. But unfortunately, I'm not. I think you just got to make sort of like really bold claims. Like, what's something that I wouldn't even dream that AI would be able to do right now and that could just become a staple? I don't know. I think maybe like recognition software or something. Simulation for people, recognition being like people can get large data banks of like people's records of like privacy details. I don't know, I guess innovation and privacy is kind of where I'm going for the future. That doesn't sound great, that sounds kind of dystopian. But anyway, I guess I'll wind this episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares greatly appreciated. Twitter, Discord down below. Hope you see each other again, but for now it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.